The authority was governed by appointees, and essentially these were all allied with the Richmond white business community. So number one, they decided they were going to build a highway, and secondly, the highway was going to go right through Jackson Ward. This is a photograph taken in the late 50s of the completed highway. 10% of the black population was displaced. Now, African Americans who lost their home to the highway, who were in a better position to buy a new home, often went to Barton Heights, the area around Virginia Union. But lower income blacks who really did not have the resources to buy another house, at that point were forced into public housing. And by that time, Fairfield and Whitcomb Court in the 50s had been built and placed in East End Richmond. So this is when you begin to see two things. Number one, you begin to see many blacks moving to East End Richmond, going to Fairfield and Whitcomb Court. Poverty begins to go up. And this is the beginning also of segregation within the black community itself. One thing about Jackson Ward, it was segregated from the rest of the city, but internally, Jackson Ward was socially very integrated. All incomes within Jackson Ward lived close together. You had business executives and you had professionals who lived just down the block from tradespeople, and they lived just about a short distance from people who were really struggling. But it was a very cohesive, integrated socially neighborhood. The highway broke that up. One small victory that the black community won had to do with this structure right here. These are photographs of the demolition in preparation for the highway. This is a very historic church. This is 6 Mount Zion Baptist Church. This church was started at the end of the Civil War by a slave who had been freed at the end of the war. He started this church in an abandoned Confederate horse stable along the James River. His name was John Jasper. He had learned to read and write remarkably. Well, the church grew and grew to the point that they had to move out of the horse stables, and they built a new church here. The black community rallied around that church and were able to save it. There was a decision to extend Interstate 64 west, and the decision was for it to extend through the city and connect with the turnpike. So when 64 was extended and connected with the turnpike, more homes were destroyed. In fact, there was a very, very cohesive black neighborhood known as Navy Hill. And that's really the first instance when you begin to see a large chunk of Navy Hill be destroyed. What ultimately led to the complete loss of Navy Hill, and by the way, Navy Hill School was a wonderful school. It was an elementary school for blacks. This is a photo of the choir. This is a photograph of a schoolroom. And the school was well known in the black community as being one of the best schools anywhere. In fact, I've read where the achievement level of that elementary school rivaled the achievement level of any white elementary school in the city of Richmond. So it really was quite a phenomenal school. But what happened, in addition to the extension of 64, is that we built the Coliseum, and then next came the Biotech Center. I took this photograph from the top of City Hall. This essentially was Navy Hill. It is no longer. There is not a single structure of Navy Hill that exists. It was tragic enough that Navy Hill was completely destroyed. But equally tragic is the lack of any material evidence of that neighborhood. There was a small granite marker that read, "Dedicated to the memories of our demised loved ones, July the 17th, 1993. Love and memories never die as days roll on and years pass by. Deep in our hearts, memories are kept of the ones we loved and shall never forget." Donated by the Bob Curry Society, the Navy Hill Reunion, and friends. This marker, unfortunately, was misplaced, and I found it in the lower level of a parking deck owned by the Biotech Center.